This is my dad's old mid-2011 11-inch MacBook Air. This is a mid-2013 13-inch MacBook Air. This is a 2017 5K iMac. And this is why I don't trust Macs. I'm not the first person to say that Apple's designs usually put form over function, especially when it comes to Macs. Proprietary SSDs, security screws, and glued-on parts may make Macs look like single integrated systems to end users, but they also make repairs hard, if not impossible, for people who don't have the right tools. We've already heard about the issues with the Intel i9 MacBook Pros, which honestly should have gotten a redesign because they started out performing poorly and they got redesigned with the Apple Silicon transition anyway. I want to stay on this point for a bit because it kind of demonstrates this theory that I've got. Apple designs their Macs to be disposable. Poor design and manufacturing choices, whether negligent or intentional, reduce the lifespan of Macs while repairability is made difficult by design. And although my sample size is small, it is telling that I have this many Windows computers from as far back as 2003 that still work as they did on day one, while every single Mac computer that my family has owned has suffered some sort of hardware failure. So today, I'll go over every single one of those failures. And even though I can't know for sure what caused them because Apple makes it too hard for me to find out, I'll still be able to speculate on what happened. Starting with... This was my family's first Mac. I'd already been using Macs at school for a while, like the iMac, the iBook G4, and the polycarbonate MacBooks. But this was a huge upgrade from those. The new hardware and state-of-the-art OS X Lion made the Air a really enjoyable computer to use, even though it did heat up quite easily and rev the fans loudly during normal use. So imagine my dismay when I took it out of storage and the Wi-Fi wasn't working. Seeing no hardware found on the Wi-Fi adapter screen suggested that the adapter had died, and I confirmed that it was not just an OS issue by booting into a Mac OS installer that also didn't list the Wi-Fi adapter in the network utility. Now, I've never had a Wi-Fi adapter just fail on me before, and I don't have the screwdriver bits to find out why. So here are a few theories on what happened. The first is poor quality control at the manufacturing level. Poor soldering combined with heat issues may have caused a joint connecting the Wi-Fi chip to the motherboard to come loose. Another possible explanation is that the module itself was part of a bad batch that had higher fail rates. And we can't rule out the random failure from neutrino strikes, even though it's really unlikely. And even so, a hardware failure is a hardware failure, and that sucks. At least they don't happen that often, right? This MacBook has a special place in my heart because I've used it for such a long time. It's over 10 years old now, and I've used it actively for over 5 of those 10 years. The earliest videos on this channel, which I highly suggest you avoid, were made in iMovie on the 2013 Air. It was a pretty good laptop. Even after I upgraded away, my brother still used it as his primary laptop. Well, one day he comes up to me and asks me for a headset because the microphone doesn't work anymore. We both tried troubleshooting and it didn't work. No dice. Because again, it was a hardware failure. And as with last time, booting into another OS didn't fix it. Yet another hardware failure of the likes never seen before with this many PC laptops. As with the other MacBook, I can't tell exactly what went wrong, but I do have some theories. It could be, again, poor quality control at the factory, or Apple supplier could be bad, or even, maybe, it could be a random hardware failure. With the two MacBooks, I can give Apple the benefit of the doubt, but this next case is a completely different story. I made a pretty bad unboxing video of this iMac back in 2017, around when I started my channel. My dad had just gotten it for work, and it served him well for quite a few years until this spring when it started to act up. All of a sudden, it was slow. We tried troubleshooting by rebooting, resetting the PRAM and the SMC, and deleting apps to no avail. It was only when I realized that a slow boot process could be a disk issue that I ran smart diagnostics on both the internal spinning hard drive and SSD that made up the Fusion drive, revealing that the SSD was close to failure. I wanted to preface this analysis by saying that my dad never closes his tabs and rarely reboots his computer, resulting in his swap usage going above his system memory amount of 16 gigabytes frequently. Even so, I think the fact that the SSD failed right after 5 years of use is still Apple's fault. To understand why, here's a quick explanation of the Fusion drive. iMacs with Fusion drives actually contain two drives: a small proprietary blade SSD, in this case 128 gigabytes in size, and a larger spinning magnetic hard drive, in this case 2 terabytes in size. macOS constantly moves data between the two drives in order to use the SSD as a fast cache for the most commonly used files and applications, and the hard drive as a larger but slower storage space for less used data. For example, the SSD likely holds Core OS components, applications like web browsers, and swap space for paging the contents of memory in so that the system doesn't run out of memory. This is a flawed design because the flash chips and SSDs fail after getting written to too many times. Generally, larger SSDs have longer lifespans because they have more flash to write to, and conversely, smaller SSDs have shorter lifespans. A small SSD that you're constantly writing to because the OS is trying to optimize a cache is predictably not going to last as long as that same SSD that's being normally used as an OS drive. Now, I don't mean to say that every Apple Fusion drive is just going to last you 5 years. My dad basically abused his drive. But that doesn't mean that the Fusion drive hurts its own longevity by design. You can argue that all of the components that I mentioned in this video that failed are user replaceable, and you would be right, technically. But most people don't have the tools to undo the pentalobe screws holding the Mac bottom covers on, and they don't have the expertise to undo the glue that holds the iMac Retina screen onto the chassis. And even Apple itself limits repair options. I took the iMac to the Genius Bar, not that I wanted to, but it was a work computer, and asked the representative if he could just install a normal 2 terabyte SSD. And the representative told me that although it was a great idea and he would if he couldn't do it because the company policy forbade changing the original configuration that shipped with the computer. And that interaction inspired me to make this video because I believe now that the true Apple tax comes in the form of reduced longevity. Whether it be because of poor design choices, manufacturing issues, or the intentional hamstringing of repair options, all because Apple wants to sell you a Mac and not a computer. Add in the opaque proprietary hardware like the SMC and T2 chips, and the user-friendly Mac becomes a nightmare to troubleshoot in the first place. Honestly, all of my experience on these Macs has made me afraid to buy a new one. But then again, they've also all been on Intel Macs. I haven't tried Apple Silicon yet, and hopefully, the platform changes that came with Apple Silicon have also resolved these issues. But I think it's still too early to tell. I'm not yet a complete cynic who believes that Apple actively designs their products to achieve planned obsolescence. But while I'll hold out hope for Apple Silicon, that doesn't mean that I'll be holding my breath. Before I go, I do want to know in the comments whether you've had similar issues with Macs in the past. I would like to know if what I've been experiencing is just an unfortunate set of coincidences, or if this is symptomatic of a larger problem. Anyway, thanks for watching.